Hi guys, it's been a while again, almost a quarter of a year again. I had the best of intentions at the beginning of the year to do more regular recent reads videos and reading wrap-ups and so on. But they were all thwarted, all my good intentions were thwarted by the abysmal quality of the books that I was reading. Or at the very least, the books were kind of lackluster and or boring and just generally disappointing, especially since some of them were books that I had been looking forward to reading for quite some time and that I was excited about and that were supposed to be amazing. And maybe some of them were when they were first published, but nowadays they don't quite live up to their reputation. At least to me, they didn't. And as much as I love trashing books, I don't want that to be the only thing I ever do on this channel, and so I just ended up not making any videos at all. And so for a while, I just retreated into reading only romantic suspense and mystery novels by Josh Lanyon. And about them, there really isn't that much to say. Josh Lanyon's stories are just really good, solid crime stories with a big element of romance. And something that is important for me is that Josh Lanyon is one of the precious few romance authors who usually writes single perspective. That's important to me because I think dual perspective is just so boring. It takes all the suspense right out of the romance. And it is really, at the end of the day, just a mark of a bad writer if you are unable to convey information about the inner life of a character without writing from that character's perspective. So a good writer should be able to convey the other character's perspective without actually writing from that perspective, and that makes for a much more joyful reading experience for me because it is the more clever way of writing, and I love cleverly written books. That said, my favorite of the books by Josh Lanyon that I've read this year turned out to be actually one that does use dual perspective. However, both of the viewpoint characters in this novel systematically avoid thinking certain thoughts and thinking about certain things. So therefore it worked for me again. The book would be Snowball in Hell, and it's a historical mystery, a detective story when told from the perspective of one of the characters, and a sleuth story when told from the perspective of the other one. And it's set in New York City in 1945. However, I broke my streak at the beginning of the month and I'm now reading other stuff again with Newfound Optimism. And what's helping me do that is the new round of Booktrovert Bingo that Aubrey from Chapter and Converse launched last week. It's a challenge that runs until the summer solstice, and it contains 25 prompts which are supposed to help you kick your ass in gear and pick up all the books on your shelves that you supposedly want to read. So now I'm in the middle of reading The New Life by Tom Crewe, his debut novel, a historical novel about a sort of spring awakening in late Victorian England based on real people and real events. It's been keeping my curiosity so far. I'm a third of the way in, but if I'm honest, I can imagine that with its dry writing style, it might become a little stale soon. So I've taken a little break from it and am now reading Carys Davies's novel West, which was published in 2018, and it had been sort of on the periphery of my bookish vision. It's been nominated for a handful of prizes and it received critical acclaim, but It's never sounded really interesting to me until last week when I listened to the latest episode of the podcast A Good Read, a BBC4 podcast, which is a reading recommendation podcast in which the host talks to two guests each week on each episode, and they all recommend one novel each, which they've all three read and all three discuss in the episode. It's usually pretty frustrating because they usually pick books that really don't need any advertisement, like classics by Jane Austen or Thomas Hardy, or the new hot thing, which is being discussed everywhere anyway. But every once in a while, you find real gems in this podcast. And in last week's episode, they talked about West by Carys Davies, and it suddenly sounded interesting to me. It's a very short epic about a man from Pennsylvania, an English immigrant to Pennsylvania, who reads about the discovery of the bones of huge big animals, presumably mammoths, somewhere to the west. And he becomes obsessed with these animals and with the thought of going in search for them and finding them. He doesn't know where he'll find them. It might be on his side of the Rocky Mountains or on the far side. He only has a vague idea of the geography, but it doesn't matter to him. He's so obsessed, he just takes off anyway and leaves his 10-year-old daughter in the care of his sister. And then we kind of get his journey from his own perspective and from the perspective of his daughter, who has stayed behind and is encountering problems and complications at home herself. It's so interesting, such an original subject, I think, and I'm definitely going to talk more about this book when I've completed reading it. But already at the beginning of the month, I also read another Penguin Green Ideas collection. This one, a collection of essays by Wendell called What I Stand For Is What I Stand On, and it's Green Ideas number 14. Green Ideas are these little booklets, all by one author, and collections of essays and speeches, columns, etc., writing all about men's and society's relationship with nature and the environment, about environmental protection, conservation, land ownership, land use, land stewardship, and the social and political implications of that. This one, I have to say, was a pleasant surprise. I really appreciated Wendell Berry's scathing attitude towards environmental and social movements and their hypocrisy and ultimate uselessness. I think this one is, it represents a viewpoint that is a bit different from most of the other voices in the series, I think, and makes a very valuable addition to the series for that reason, I'd say. So that's it for the moment. These are the books that I'm reading at the moment, except for a couple of books that I pick up only now and then, like my book for the bus that I'm reading when I ride the bus, which is The Fortune of War by Patrick O'Brian, which is the 6th book in the Master and Commander series. This one's actually fulfills a prompt for the Booktrovert bingo, as it is set for the most part in Boston, quite unexpectedly. And I also have this fantasy romance on the go, which is called A Rake Of His Own, and it's part of the Stariel series, which is set in a university town called Knoxbridge, in a sort of Victorian or early Edwardian, not England, but it's basically England. England and fairy. Fairy is a thing. And mysterious and beautiful fey princes are also a thing. This one did a bait and switch on me. It pretended to be single perspective and then just changed viewpoint a third of the way in. And that's when I took a break from it. And that's really it from me for the time being. But things are looking up, and it looks like I'll have some interesting books to talk to you again soon. I appreciate all of you who are still here, who are still watching, even though my uploading schedule, if you can call it that, has been more than erratic for the last year at least. So thank you so much for putting up with that and for still being here and still watching. I appreciate each and every one of you who watches my videos. If you've also had a hard time finding good reading material lately, feel free to commiserate with me in the comments. Or if you have some obscure recommendations for me that you think I might not have come across so far, I'd appreciate it if you shared them with me as well, because my usual sources for recommendations or for finding new books don't really seem to be working for me anymore. Anyhow, I hope I'd see you soon with some new good books. Bye guys, take care.